Before I get into this tutorial, just a quick reminder. If you ever do any alterations to your Windows disk, whether you do any partitioning to it or add software or alter its boot partitioning or anything like that, you should really have backed off your Windows system disk. So on that basis, there will be some links in the descriptions below taking you to some tutorials showing you how to use Macrium Reflect, which will allow you to back up your Windows systems disk, or in fact back up an image any disk. So with all that said, if you plan on doing what is in this tutorial, I would recommend watching the tutorial once all the way through just to familiarize yourself with the process, and then watch it through a second time whilst you're actually going through the process. Alright, David Harry here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to dual boot Windows 10 and Phoenix OS off the same hard drive. But in this particular way of doing it, you do not install Phoenix through Windows. So in this instance, you do not mess about in any way whatsoever with the Windows boot partition or the Windows bootloader. So what we're doing here is creating a separate system on the same disk, which is completely independent from Windows. So like I say, it will not interfere with the Windows bootloader or anything to do with Windows at all. So the way that we do this is by downloading a bunch of files, which I will have links to and whatnot, and I will go through this step by step right now. But the other thing to bear in mind here is that I'm doing this for a UEFI system. Okay, so we're going to need three things here. The first thing is this, which is Mini Tool Partition Wizard. The next thing is going to be Rufus, and then the next thing after that is going to be the Phoenix OS installer or the ISO installer. Now there's going to be three links in the descriptions for this video for these three things. So what you need to do is just pause the video and go and install Mini Tool Partition Wizard from the link that I've got. Then download Rufus and install that. And then also download the ISO for Phoenix OS. There'll be a link also again in the descriptions below. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here then is to open up Mini Tool Partition Wizard. And what we're doing here is very specifically giving ourselves a little bit of space to install Phoenix OS onto. So what we do here, like I say, you can use something else if you're more familiar with using a different type of partitioning tool. I'm just going to use this one because it's nice and easy, and it's got a really nice user interface on it, which is dead easy to follow. So what I'm going to do here is come down to where it says C, because this is our Windows partition as it stands right now. Then what I'm going to do is right click on it, and then I will go to move or resize, click on that. Then what we've got here is a slider at the end which allows us to repartition that main partition for Windows and give ourselves some spare space at the end. Now because I only have an interest in really running a few games under Phoenix, I generally just only use about 20 gigabytes or thereabouts. So I'm going to bring this down to 20 gigabytes here. There we go. So 20.5 thereabouts. You can choose however much that you want at this point. I only use this amount because it suits my purposes. You're talking anywhere around, I don't know, 3 to 5 gigabytes for the main OS and some of the updates that you might do. And then all the space thereafter is going to be for installations for applications and games. But for me personally, around 20 gigabytes is fine. Okay, now what I'm going to do is okay this. And then what I do here now is hit apply for it to go off and do the partitioning. Now, what may happen here is you may be prompted and the machine may say, look, I need to switch down and power back on to continue with the partitioning of the Windows drive. If it does that, it's fine. I'm only explaining this bit right now because mine might not do that. It depends actually on a couple of things as to why it will or won't do that. But if it does do it, let it go off and do it. Now I'm going to try doing it now, and it may do it, so you might see it do it on mine. So if I hit apply and then hit yes. There we go. So this is going to do the same. So what's going to happen now? This is going to restart Windows and then continue with the partitioning. So just hit restart now. Then it's going to switch down and then it's going to power back up and it's going to start doing this, like, you know, repartitioning of that main big Windows installed partition. Hold on. Right, what it is, if it seems like I'm a little bit flummoxed at the moment, what it is, I can't see certain things going on the screens just due to the way that I've got my system set up at the moment. So as you can see right now, it's booted back up and it's going to start giving us now some indications where it's up to. Okay, so eventually that's gone and done what it was supposed to do. To be honest, I've done this loads of times and it's actually a bit faster than that usually. Okay, so what that's done, it's rebooted itself. Now it's going to boot back up. And then what we're going to find is that we have now got space on that drive, and we'll just verify that in a second. And we'll rerun the partition tool wizard as well. And we should see the space there, because if we go to Windows, or if we go and have a look at the drive structure, we probably won't know anything, because here it's going to show us one disk. Now that is actually minus 20 gigabytes, but if we didn't know what the size was in the first place, we wouldn't know that from there. So just to verify things, we'll just run the mini tool quickly again. Like I say, once this is all open, there we go. So now it's telling us unallocated at the end, we've got 20 gigabytes. So that is where we're going to install Phoenix OS. And we'll get to that after we've installed the ISO to the USB stick. So at this point, what you need to do is insert your USB stick that you intend to put the Phoenix OS installer on, and anything at least 4 gigabytes upwards will be fine. I'm going to use a 4 gigabyte USB stick, so I'm just going to pop it in now. So there's my USB stick in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run Rufus. Okay, so double click on Rufus, let that run. Do you want to allow Rufus to check for updates? Well, I don't need to. I just want to use what we've got here to install the ISO, and that'll be fine. Okay, so what we need to do is go and search for the ISO. So if we click on select here, and then go to wherever you've put the ISO. Obviously, in my instance, this ISO is on the desktop. So there we go. So double click the ISO. Hold on. Okay, now once the ISO is double clicked, like I say, I'm going to be doing UEFI. So I'm going to select GPT there and then UEFI. Now, like I say, you can try and do MBR with UEFI BIOS configuration. It may work, I don't know, I can't tell you because I don't use legacy for these things. So like I say, UEFI all the way for me. And then what we'll do, it's already selected the USB stick up here. What I would say is don't have any more USB sticks in other than the one that you want to write to, and at least then that way you can't mistakenly write over the wrong, the wrong USB stick or anything. Okie doke. Now from here, let's just click start. Now this is going to go off. Leave it on this as well, the recommended as well, write format. And then yeah, it's going to warn you that it's going to destroy stuff. That's fine. Let it okay it. Now what's going to do, this is going to go off, and it might take a little bit of time to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this power its way through till it's done its thing, and then I'll come back once it's burnt the actual image to the USB stick. Okay, so as we can see now, we have burnt the ISO file to the USB stick via Rufus. Now, I nearly missed that just then, because you'll have to excuse me actually a little bit, because you might be able to hear me throat is a little bit hoarse and stuff. What it was, I just actually went out to get some medication to have for me throat and stuff while I've been doing this, and I nearly missed the burning process. Anyway, so that's us all sorted now as far as burning the ISO is concerned. So the next thing we need to do now is to power down the computer and then switch it back on again. And then what we need to do at that point is go to the boot menu to select the USB to continue booting. Now, if you don't know how to select your boot menu, I would suggest that you go and watch another video of mine. I've done a real quick video just to give you some hints on how to go and find your boot menu for when you switch your computer on. So there'll be a link right now on the top right hand side of the screen, but also a link in the description below, just giving you an idea of how to go and find the boot key for your particular computer. Now on my particular computer, I'm on an Intel NUC, so my boot key is F10. So what's going to happen now, I'm going to power down and switch back up, and as I do that, I'll just hold in the F10 key, or indeed I might get a prompt on the screen to tell me to do that, at which point I can then select my boot drive that I want to boot from. So what I'm going to do now then is power down, and you should do the same, and then you should then go to the boot menu and join me at your boot menu. So here we go, let's just power this down, restart. Like I say, my particular boot key is F10, so I'm hitting F10 as it switches on, and then what it's gone and done here is took us to the boot menu. Okay, so as we can see here on my system, it's given me two options here. One says M.2 SATA, that's the boot drive that my Windows is on inside me NUC. And then the other one says UEFI USB. Now that is the one that I want to use to boot from right now. So what I'm going to do here, as we should see on the screen, is I'm going to use the up and down arrows here on my keyboard, which will allow me to select what I want to boot from, which is going to be the SanDisk. In your case, it's going to be whatever the USB stick was that you burned to. It'll say UEFI USB and then the name of the stick. Now what's going to happen when I hit enter in a second, it's going to give us two options, but it will kind of carry on and go to the first option if we're not quick. So what I'm going to do is navigate down to the second option as soon as it goes in. So watch this, I'll hit enter. Two options there, so I'm going to navigate down quickly to the second one. What happens is, if I left it up there on the first option, it would just carry on running as Phoenix OS in like live mode, as it were. But now, click down onto install Phoenix OS to hard disk. Then use the enter key as well on the keyboard. So we're going to go into the next part here, which is going to be all about giving us information about the disks and stuff that are on the system. So as we can see here now, we've got a number of different things on here. Now, these first four things are all different partitions on the Kingston drive, which is my boot drive. You will have something similar. And then there's another thing there, that's the USB stick. But what it is, we want to create and manipulate two partitions inside that spare space that we have on the internal SSD or the internal hard drive, whatever it is that you're using. So we go to create modify partitions, click on enter. Now we've got two options here. Hard disk removable. Well, this is going to be very simple because the hard disk is my boot drive and the removable is the USB. So we go to hard disk, enter again on the keyboard, and now it's saying, do you want to use GPT? Well, yes, because I'm using a UEFI system and also the drive is already set up that way anyway. So click over using the side arrows here. So click over to yes, hit enter. Now what it's showing us is the structure of that particular disk. Now you may not have anything that says free space at the beginning up there. Don't worry about that. But what you will have, or what you should have, is four little partitions used up with various things here. That's all stuff to do with your Windows installation. Now what we can see here is a blank partition, which is what we created earlier on the Windows. So what we're going to do here is create two partitions. So what we need to do is looking at the bottom of the screen now, where we've got align, backup, help and all that. If we use our side arrows like this, we can kind of go and select any of these options. So we use the side arrows until we get to new, then we'll click enter. Now what we're going to do here is start creating our partitions, or our initial partitions. So the first sector for the first partition, don't type anything in there, just hit enter. Now it says here, size in sectors. So what we want to type in here is 204800. Now that's going to give us roughly 100 megabytes for a partition. So just use that 204800, then click enter. Now here, it's asking us about the type of, or the file system type that we want to use here. So what we're going to do is type in EF00. Then what's going to happen here, once it formats it, it's actually going to mark it up as an EFI partition, which it needs to be, because it's going to run the bootloader for us for what's basically Linux bootloader, which is then going to run Android x86, and then therefore Phoenix OS. So basically just type in EF00. Okay, then hit enter. Now you can give this a name if you want. I'm going to call this P-EFI. That's just so I know that it's the Phoenix EFI partition. The only thing with this is that certain things may not read this partition information that you write in anyway. So it's up to you, whatever you want to put in here as to whether or not it'll even be seen anyway. Then we'll hit enter on that. Now as you can see, if you go back to the disk list, it's got number 5. It's now given us that EFI partition system with 100 megs in, which is really cool. So that's one of the partitions sorted. Now using the up and down arrows again, click down to the 20.4 gigs spare on mine, but this will just be the remainder of all the spare space that you have on yours. and then it'll automatically have selected new as it has done there. If it hasn't, you can just navigate using the side keys till you get back to new, hit enter. Now first sector here, we'll leave it as is because that's where we want the first sector. And then what it's saying here is size in sectors. Now, if we just click and enter after this, it will use the full remaining space, which is exactly what we want. So we'll just click enter. Now it's saying which code do we want to use to mark up the format type of the partition. Well, we'll use 8300 here. It's not entirely necessary, but I always do it anyway just out of practice, because if you don't do it, it should do it as 8300, but we'll force it 8300. And basically that's just a hex code to tell the system that we're using ext4 as the partition type for this partition, or the format type for this partition. Then we'll hit enter, and then it'll ask us, do we want to use a name? Well, I'm just going to call this POS for Phoenix OS. Hit enter again, and now as you can see in that list, we've now got a number 6, which is our Linux file system marked up as POS, which is the remainder of the entire disk now used up. Okay, so what we need to do is use the side keys here, and then if we move along to right and then hit enter on the keyboard, that's going to ask us to type in yes. Right, so yes, there we go. So type yes. Okay, so at this point, we're all kind of done and dusted. So what we need to do here is click along to quit. Oops, mine's just jumped right along. So click along to quit and hit enter. Now what it's saying here, please select a partition to install Phoenix OS. Well, it's the bigger partition out of the last two that we've just created. So there's 5 and 6 which we've just created on the first disk. So we need to say to it, look, go to SDA6, which is the last partition on the main boot disk. So we'll hit enter, and then we're telling it that's where the Phoenix OS information goes. So hit enter. Now at this point it's going to ask us, do we want to reformat it? Technically speaking, we shouldn't have to. Although in the past I've actually had instances where the installation failed. So what I tend to do here is always just let it reformat again. Okay, so we'll use the up and down arrows to get to the ext4, hit enter. And then it's going to just give us a couple of more warnings here about what we're about to do. Use the side arrow to go to yes. Click on that. It's going to format that. Now it's going to say, do you want to install UEFI Grub 2? Well, move along to yes. And we want it because we definitely need we do need Grub to be on there so we can boot in for us. So we'll say yes to that. Now it's going to ask us, where do we want to put it? Well, we put that in the smaller of the two partitions that we created, which is SDA5 in this instance. Like I say, it will be the last two partitions that you put onto your main disk in exactly the same way that I've done here. So 5 for me is the smaller one. So that's the one where we want to put it. So we'll OK that. Saying here about formatting it, again, might as well say yes to that. Okay, now it's going to say, do you want to install bootloader Grub? No, we don't, because we're already putting Grub 2 in there. So we'll click skip or enter to skip it, and then there we go. So what's going to happen now is going to start installing the files. Now I might do this in real time. I mean, this video's gone dead long anyway, I might as well. Yeah, so basically what it's doing now, it's installing all the installation files into the larger of the two partitions that we've just created. So just quickly at this point, what's happening, we've created the boot partition, which has a bootloader in which points at the main partition where we're putting the data, and I'll show you what all this means in a second when we go back and restart the system. Now I'll do this sync and disk thing, that's all cool. Now at this point we can just run Phoenix OS, or we can reboot. Now what I'm going to do is reboot it, just because I'll show you now how you will get into Phoenix at every point after this point onwards, and it's exactly the same way that we booted into the USB stick. So what that is, you just go to your boot key on your keyboard anytime you switch your computer on, hit the boot key, and then that is what you're going to use, that menu, to go into either Windows or into Phoenix. So what I'm going to do now is do the same. So I'm going to reboot it, and as we'll see when we power up, because my boot key is F10, I'll do F10, and we should get an idea of what's going on. In fact, what you may want to do actually is power right down first of all and take the USB stick out before you actually boot back up, just so that you can't inadvertently click on the USB stick again. So I'm going to do that as it powers down anyway, so we won't see the USB stick. So take yours out as well after you've powered down and then power back up again. Okay, so what I'm doing here is hitting the F10 key. There we go. Okay, so what we now have is the UEFI partitions on my Windows disk. And as you can see, there's two now. But what it is, the first one is Windows, so we don't want to launch that one. We want to go to the second one because this one is now going to be Phoenix. So we'll select down there as you just see me do, use the up and down arrows again on your keyboard, and then hit enter. Then we get Phoenix as the option. Now if we don't hit anything on the keyboard, it's going to go in anyway. Now this is going to be the first boot of the system, so I'll just see how long this takes. If it's going to take too long, because what it is on the first boot, it still is kind of doing a bunch of its installation stuff as well. So let's just see how long it kind of get with this. Do you know what? No, this might take some time. I'm going to fast forward through this one. Okay, so what it is now, we're into this part here, and I'm not going to show you anything about Phoenix. I'm just going to assume you know what you're doing with this, because this isn't a tutorial on how to use Phoenix, but I'm just going to go through the first part of the setup. So I'm going to change that to English United States. I'm going to click Next, click Accept. I'm not going to bother here with any connections. You can do that and connect it to your Wi-Fi system. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to skip straight past this. Hold on. Just so I can get quickly to the desktop. As you can see here, you know, you set up, you know, a name and all the rest of it. Anyway, so there we go. So there's the Phoenix desktop there. Now from here on in, what you can now then do is go in and, you know, run the Play Store, set up your Google account, download all your apps. In my instance, the first thing here would be PUBG, followed by COD and stuff like that. So you can just do whatever you want. But basically, like you can see now, we are now in Phoenix. And this particular installation is completely independent of the Windows bootloader. So once again, the whole point of doing this particular way of doing it is so that we don't interfere with any of the Windows partitions as far as bootloaders are concerned and such. So we are not touching anything to do with Windows. Okay, now just before I finish all this, what I'm going to do now is restart the system and show you it go back to Windows. So do a restart. And again, in fact, actually, when it restarts now, because Windows is our primary boot partition, this will boot into Windows. As you can see, I've not hit anything on the keyboard, so no F10. So what it's going to do now is go straight back to Windows. There we go. Now, once it's gone into Windows, I'm just going to recycle it again, and then I'm going to force it back into Phoenix again, just so we can see one more cycle round and it actually working. So let me just do this restart again. And like I say, get ready to hit your boot key once the system restarts and powers back up again. So as soon as this goes dark on the screen, I just start hitting F10. The reason why this is going to take some time restarting is because this version of Windows has only recently gone on. I think this is actually still trying to do some updates in the background. Right, so F10 as it starts booting up. There we go. There's my boot screen. I'll just scroll down there again to the second UEFI partition, which in this instance is Phoenix, or it's the What's Installed Linux bootloader for Android Phoenix. Click in there, Phoenix. Now I'll click on the button that time to launch into it, but even if you don't touch the button, like we've seen earlier on, it will time out and boot in anyway. Now this is a proper boot time now. As you can see, that was really quick. So once it's loaded on the system, literally, you know, Phoenix is going to boot in within a few seconds. Anyway, there we have it. I know this video's been a bit long-winded and stuff, but to be honest, I'm actually under the weather with me throat and stuff, so hopefully this hasn't dragged out more than it should have done. And the other thing with these things as well, it's all well and good when someone says do this, do that, without actually explaining and showing it, because these kind of walkthroughs, these are designed for people who don't have, you know, much kind of technical knowledge of these things. And you have to remember as well with stuff like this isn't my forte. So, you know, I'm not overly up on all this stuff. I know how to do certain things with it. But when I'm looking at other tutorials similar to this, I want a lot of explanation, hence why there's a lot of explanation when I do my stuff, because I'm literally doing this stuff for noobs, you know, because I'm basically a noob myself with certain things. So there's no way I want to just kind of like, you know, think that everyone knows exactly what they're doing and this, that and the other. Hence why there'll always be a fair amount of explanation and description within what I'm doing. Now also, I'm going to do another tutorial showing you the basic way of installing Phoenix, which is to use the Windows installer. I'm also going to do another version which is going to be very similar to this one, almost identical, but using a separate disk, which will also mean that you can use a separate USB like thumb drive or something, which means you've got a portable installation of Phoenix. So you can actually plug that into various different computers which are going to be compatible with Phoenix, and then you can kind of take your Phoenix install with you anywhere on a portable disk or a thumb drive or something like that. And I'll be doing a few other things as well to do with these type of installation-y things. Also as well, if you're interested in game stuff, I'll do the odd game thing on this channel, which is my main channel. But if you're just into like watching a load of boring walkthroughs and, you know, resolution tests and all that, there'll be a link in the description also to another channel where I throw that kind of stuff on. It's actually called The Game Thing, and you can get to that as well by going to thegamething.com, which will be a website at some point, but we'll probably just link initially to this other thing that I'm doing. Also as well, last thing to say is, if you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share the video, or, you know, all that usual stuff. Look, I'm going to get off. My voice is definitely failing here. I shouldn't be talking this long. I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye now.